Hello, I'm Sophia, and welcome to What We Need to Know About Ukraine. Here, I learn about Ukrainian history, literature, and culture, and share my findings with you. Today's episode is a brief overview of what was the Ukrainian People's Republic and why we should know about it. Many think that the whole of the Russian Empire easily transferred to the Soviet Union and there was nothing in between. That is not true. Nor is it true that Ukraine's sense of identity and desire for independence came in 1991. It was actually there for centuries. The Ukrainian People's Republic was an independent state on the territory of Ukraine that came into existence during the First World War and lasted for just a few years. It was a tumultuous time in Europe's history, and there were many reasons why the state met its end so quickly. Of course, at that time, it was not the entire territory of modern-day Ukraine that made up the UPR. As a quick note, Western Ukraine formed its own separate government called the West Ukrainian People's Republic, and it was not the same thing and not the same territory as the Ukrainian People's Republic, which I will talk about today. Firstly, here's a short overview of what the Ukrainian People's Republic is. The Ukrainian People's Republic lasted from 1917 to early 1921, and it was a reaction to the Bolshevik coup in Petrograd. When the Russian Empire collapsed and the Bolsheviks took over, Ukrainians finally had a chance to make some change. At first, the Ukrainian People's Republic proclaimed itself as an autonomous state within the Russian Republic. After that, the independence of the Ukrainian People's Republic was proclaimed in January 1918, which was shortly after the Soviet invasion of Ukraine that same month. The invaders were even able to reach Kyiv, which was its capital. Throughout its life, the Ukrainian People's Republic did not have a break from war. It was constantly attacked by different countries, including Soviet Russia, Germany, and when at one time the Ukrainian People's Republic was connected to the West Ukrainian People's Republic, it was also attacked by Poland. World War I played a big part in the Ukrainian People's Republic. On one hand, it spurred the deterioration of two empires, the Russian Empire and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, both of which had Ukrainian lands. The chaos of the First World War and the fall of the two empires let Ukrainians finally separate from the Russian Empire and later the Russian Republic. The Ukrainian People's Republic also needed to make important decisions while it was still extremely young. At a certain point, it was necessary to sign a peace treaty with Germany and the Central Powers. This happened to be the very famous Brest-Litovsk Treaty. The reason it was necessary to sign was because the Soviet Russians, both Bolsheviks and non-Bolsheviks, would attack from one side, and the Germans and the Central Powers would attack from the other. A two-front war in both East and West was too much for a newly created government to handle, and because there was no chance to cooperate with Soviet Russia, to remain independent, the Ukrainian People's Republic decided to sign the peace treaty with the Central Powers. This will come to backfire later on. Interestingly enough, Germany and the Central Powers recognized the independence of the Ukrainian People's Republic in the treaty. One source which I must talk about more is the memorandum to the government of the United States on the recognition of the Ukrainian People's Republic. It was written in 1920 by a representative of the Ukrainian People's Republic, Julian Baczynski. The memorandum is around 20 pages and it's definitely worth a read. Quite a powerful piece of writing that tries to convince the United States government to recognize the independence of the Ukrainian People's Republic. There are many points that are brought up in support of the benefit that the independence of the UPR will bring, and these points are connected to economics, agriculture, and geopolitical issues. Of course, first and foremost, Julian discusses how the US will benefit from a free Ukrainian People's Republic. I mentioned before that the peace treaty that was signed did not produce the desired effect. The US government and many other European states, which sided with the Allies, no longer trusted Ukraine and saw it as a subordinate to Germany. This view is unfortunately still popular among Westerners who are aware that such a country existed. I suppose the reason for that is there's barely any information about the UPR and Ukrainian history in general in the English language. Western historians and history enthusiasts, therefore, fall into the trap of Russian propaganda in this instance, but I will talk about that a little later. Ukraine was not seen as independent by other nations, and it was constantly attacked. It was in a horrible situation and had no other way but to sign the peace. After all, they were not becoming Germany's allies. In the memorandum, Baczynski tries to explain this and says that Ukraine was never a puppet state to Germany. He also says that Romania signed a peace treaty with Germany as well, and yet got the benefit of the doubt since the Allies said it was in a tough position. Ukrainian People's Republic, Julian says, was in one that was even worse. And without any support, a new formed state was not to survive for long. In a lengthy history book published in 2013 about 20th century Europe called Europe's Long Century by Spencer M. Descala, there is only one sentence that is related to the Ukrainian People's Republic. This is the sentence as it's written in the book. The Ukraine, one of the richest areas of Russia, became a German puppet state. End of quote. Now let's see what is wrong with this sentence. Well, first of all, the words Ukrainian People's Republic were not even mentioned in the book. Ukraine was no longer a region of the Russian Empire and not yet a region of the USSR. It was an independent state, and therefore the correct phrasing would be simply Ukraine, with no word the in front of it. The word the signifies an area which isn't a country and which has no independence. At that time, Ukraine was an independent and sovereign state and ought to be called Ukraine. This is different, of course, for countries that are made of multiple words, like the United Kingdom or the Dominican Republic and the Ukrainian People's Republic. This makes my next point obvious. It was not an area of Russia. I don't think this needs any further elaboration. And finally, the Ukrainian People's Republic was not a German puppet state. Not only is that mentioned and discussed in the memorandum, but also by other historians. Ukraine wanted to be independent, and Germany had little interest in it at the time. The new leader that came into power in 1918, after the Germans willingly helped Ukraine kick out the Russians, and also arrested the Ukrainian People's Republic government, was Pavlo Skoropadsky. Skoropadsky and his government were able to establish an effective administrative organization and create millions of Ukrainian language textbooks, many schools, and even 2 universities. They also created the Ukrainian Academy of Science in the very few months that they were in power. Very soon, Skoropadsky and his government were overturned. There is more to say about Skoropadsky and many other elements of the Ukrainian People's Republic, but I'll leave the exploration of all that to a different episode. So why did the Ukrainian People's Republic fall? Why didn't it survive for longer? There are many different reasons that were all a combination, and I will talk about the main ones. Firstly, the Ukrainian People's Republic was affected by continuous war. This, of course, was really costly, deadly, and disorientating. The government could never focus on stabilizing the country and then developing it. They kept having to fight and move around from city to city. The government itself was not stable. It kept changing, getting overthrown, etc. The government ideologies were not the same, and the waves of governments had different political views. For example, it went from the conservative hetmanat to the social democratic directoriat, which is directory in English. Because of the constant chaos with the fighting, people kept switching sides and could not come to a thought-out decision. The situation based on which they had to decide also constantly changed. Of course, I already mentioned the lack of recognition and support from other countries. The lack of resources, ammunition, and even quality railroads, which were left over from the Russian Empire, were strongly felt. Because of the constant war, they were not in the best shape. Without the help from other countries, it was impossible for the Ukrainian People's Republic to build something new, establish production of ammunition, and fight a war all at once. Overall, Ukraine wasn't given a chance and enough time to stabilize or to form a government strong enough to withstand so many forces opposing it. Its position was not the best and government not the strongest. There were strong feelings of national identity. In the memorandum, Julian Baczynski mentions the aims of Ukrainians and their national identity, and I quote, "The national aspirations of Ukraine embrace political liberation for all Ukrainians, consolidation of all free Ukrainians into one state, the erection of a constitutional democratic republic, and economic cooperation with neighboring and other states. Ukraine's claim to independence is based upon the following principal grounds. 1. The existence of the Ukrainians as a well-defined, separate, group-conscious race with a continuous historic and cultural tradition. 2. Their occupation over a period of centuries of the lands where they now dwell. 3. Their age-long efforts, increasingly of popular origin, to achieve and maintain political independence. 4. The obvious interest and desire of the entire Ukrainian population to organize and sustain its own economic life free of exploitation by neighbors and foreign powers. And 5. The crying need for a new order in Eastern Europe and the permanent elimination of the historic struggle between Poland and Russia to control the natural resources of Ukraine. By all the canons of ethnology and history, the Ukrainians form a distinct racial unit. In America, there has been a popular impression that Ukraine is merely a province of Russia, identified with it linguistically and racially. This is a misapprehension. The leading anthropologists, even among the Russians, agree that the Ukrainians constitute a physical type clearly different from the Great Russians, the White Ruthenians, or the Poles. In culture and temperament, they display peculiarities which permeate their whole social and moral nature. Their language is a separate Slavic tongue and not merely a dialect of the Great Russian. End of quote. The national understanding of Ukrainians then, in May 1920, is very similar to today, regardless of what story Russian propaganda might make up. Just recently, before the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, people were not sure what Ukraine was, and hopefully, these times are behind us. Ukraine now is once again being attacked by Russia. Luckily, it has much better chances of winning this time, since not only did it have more time to solidify as a government, but it is also supported, helped, and recognized by many countries all over the world. Thank you so much for joining me today, and this was what we needed to know about Ukraine this week.